President Trump told reporters yesterday he will not jeopardize U.S. economic ties with Saudi Arabia over the murder of Washington Post columnist and U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last month.
In a statement, the president called Saudi Arabia a great ally and refused to condemn the kingdom or the crown prince for Khashoggi's murder. He even explained the financial considerations for his support.
It's America first for me. It's all about America first. We're not going to give up hundreds of billions of dollars in orders.
So Weijia Jiang is traveling with the president, and you're in West Palm Beach, Florida, where the weather is much nicer than we're expecting here. So Weijia, tell us more about what the president said in his written statement and his comments to reporters yesterday. What's the overall message that he conveyed to the international community and to Saudi Arabia?
Well, you just heard it, Anne-Marie. Not only did the president say America first during his remarks to reporters right before he left to come here to Florida, but also in that statement, the first two words were America first, exclamation point. By the way, exclamation points popped up throughout the entire statement. This was one that was very clearly, undeniably in the president's own voice. And so while he called what happened to Jamal Khashoggi a horrible crime and he condemned it at the end of the day, he said, that the relationship with Saudi Arabia is the priority because there is so much financially at stake for the United States. And so reporters were very quick to ask, does that mean that there is no price, that it's too expensive for human rights, for example, because America has been such a leader for so long on issues of human rights worldwide? And the president denies that. He says, look, the bottom line is we don't know exactly what the crown prince knew, even though U.S. officials have told CBS News that the CIA has substantiated an assessment that it was the crown prince himself who ordered this murder. President Trump is suggesting that's not the case and that we may never know how involved he was. But, we do know that the U.S. has already sanctioned 17 Saudis for their role in what happened to this journalist. And so that is why alone, even without the component of the crown prince, Congress and critics of President Trump are calling for tougher action. But it's clear where he stands because he has made it so clear, not only in that statement, but also when he talked to reporters, that it is America first, that there's a lot to lose, and he's not willing to lose it.
Well, clearly, Weijia, this has lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are now criticizing President Trump. I've seen folks who in the past have supported everything the president has said and done, like Rand Paul, Lindsey Graham, Bob Corker, who has not always been a strong supporter of President Trump. They've all come out. What they're basically saying is, look, American values have been put on the back burner here in some attempt to talk about this national interest that has to do with money, mercantilism, essentially, over values that we espouse here in this country. Could that criticism have any effect on the administration?
Well, in some ways it already has. I mean, there is a bipartisan effort to pass legislation that would stop an arms deal, for example, with Saudi Arabia, that the president continues to tout because he says, if it's not the U.S. providing these weapons, it will simply be Russia or China, and he refuses to lose out on hundreds of billions of dollars. That is a figure that he has come up with himself. But for now, this criticism, as you pointed out so rightfully, is coming even from his allies. And so eventually that could have an impact on him. But I think as far as in practice, the president has made very clear where he is willing to go in terms of that line, in terms of penalizing Saudi Arabia, and he's not going to cross it. And he continues to point out the actions he's already taken against those individuals. But there are calls to do more, to cut off ties with Saudi Arabia and to say money is not all the U.S. cares about because we have to stand up for what is right. But, even Secretary of State Mike Pompeo yesterday echoed the president's message. And he seemed to be caught off guard when one reporter asked, hey, does this mean, since the president has said as much, that the hunt for answers in the Khashoggi case is over? Because it seemed that regardless of what is found, at the end of the day, the president has little wiggle room to budge and to take stronger action. And the secretary seemed a little caught off guard, and he said, there will likely be more facts that surface. That is what happens in these instances, and we'll act accordingly as those come out. But I think for now, at least, this is what we're going to get. The president could not have been more clear yesterday that he will not go beyond what has already been done. And he even said he's willing to meet with the Crown Prince later this month when he's in Argentina for a global summit. So if they meet, that will certainly be one meeting to watch very closely.
Oh, yeah. All eyes will be on them for sure. Before we let you go, Weijia, I wanted to ask you about a different topic. The president and his legal team have confirmed that the president submitted written answers to questions from the special counsel. So what do we know about the scope of those questions and what it might mean for the investigation moving forward? Could it be wrapping up?
Well, the Trump legal team has made very clear that we're not going to see, at least from them, exactly what was written and presented to the special counsel. Earlier this week, the president said it was he himself who came up with the answers, even though his attorneys have been working on them for well over a month. Of course, the negotiations to even get to this point have been ongoing as well. And what we can tell you is that they were limited. The questions themselves were limited to possible collusion with Russia during the campaign. But what was off limits, off the table, is any potential obstruction since the president took office. And so we know that any questions he answered, and we believe there are about 15 questions, were focused on potential Russian meddling, and not an attempt to cover it up. So just because these have now been submitted does not indicate, at least we cannot draw the conclusion that the investigation itself is wrapping up. There is a chance that Mueller looks at the answers and he's not satisfied and he has follow-up questions. There's another chance that, despite having these answers in front of him, he subpoenas President Trump anyway. And so that has been the ongoing big question, whether the president will sit down for an interview. I do think this buys him some time to avoid that in-person interview and to avoid a subpoena. But there is no indication that Mueller plans to wrap up the probe anytime soon, even though that is what the Trump team and the president himself continues to demand, saying it's time. You've had plenty of opportunity to come up with something, so let's wrap this up now.
Weijia, thanks a lot.